Good morning. We have 48 days left in the Maryland General Assembly session, and it has been a very spirited and busy session as always. There are many issues that we're seeing across the board, but most of them can be summed up as it concerns to the state budget and taxation. I do want to start at the federal level, though, and first say that given the changes with the administration and different eliminations of departments and guidance and executive orders, there is uncertainty that is flowing down to the state level as well as the local level. We're seeing it in the work that we do from working with some partners in the county and concerns at the state level for funding, some of that federal funding for Medicare, some of the funding for community services, and how that elimination or those decreases um, from the federal government to the state will then again locally impact what we are able to perform and services provide at the local level. So we're keeping a watchful eye on that. There have been some small impacts to date. We're hoping that as the guidance shakes through and there is some clarity around what is allowed and what is not allowed, that some of our partners that we work with will be able to re-engage with us. But right now it's just kind of up in the air and building the plane as it's in the air is the saying, as to what's happening at that federal level. And obviously, there is a lot of tension and contest between the political parties as to how to move forward. So just trying to navigate all of that and stay close with our representatives at the federal level. Moving on to the state. So again, talking about the state's budget and the deficit that we are facing, a lot of the legislation that has been introduced this year centers around that and how to make up that legislation. The Harford County Chamber is very fortunate to have working relationships with the Maryland Chamber, as well as some partners with the Maryland Association of CPAs, the National Association of Benefit Insurance Providers for some of the healthcare. And then we have a great relationship with our delegation. So making sure that we stay connected to our delegates and senators for what they're introducing, not only that impacts the state overall, but bills that affect specifically Harford County and getting those introduced. I would like to say that on February 27th, the Maryland Chamber of Commerce is hosting a business outlook, and that is going to be in the morning at the Westin and really give an update as to what's happening in session, what the status of some legislation is, what reading the tea leaves as to what is going to pass. And then in the afternoon, there is a press conference to talk about what negative impacts some of these proposed legislative items will have, again, pretty much related to taxes. And if you bear with me 1 minute, I'd like to just go through some of those and talk about um, what that really looks like for you and I, small business owners, but basically the general public. And if we're looking at legislative threats that are happening at the state level right now as it relates to tax, we're looking at a sales tax expansion. So past proposed sales tax expansions would lower Maryland state sales tax from 6 to 5%, but at a significant cost. It would expand the tax to a long list of everyday services that have never been taxed before. So, making sure that we are aware of those indirect impacts from expanding a sales tax. Combined reporting, this is one that gets introduced every session, but really trying to make sure that the elected officials that we have at the state level understand the impacts of combined reporting. And the proposed legislation, the combined reporting requirements would force businesses to calculate their taxes based on combined profits and losses from their operations across the country, not just Maryland. This policy creates complex and unpredictable tax obligations, often shifting tax burdens between industries without providing long-term and predictable revenue gains to the state. It's a recipe for higher compliance costs, what often don't get factored in to what legislators think about is the additional compliance costs and that administrative burden on businesses that they have to take. Um, and it's not leveling the playing field. It threatens to tip the scales against businesses that are trying to grow and thrive in the state. Before I move on, I know Ron, you dropped a question in the chat about the sales tax expansion. I don't think that there's too much of an appetite at this point, given the other taxes and the fee increases that are happening, but it's something that we are keeping a watchful eye on because at some point, the state is going, as President Ferguson said, everything's on the table when it comes to finding money to fill this deficit. And then additional pass-through entity taxes. This is definitely one that we are concerned about and keeping a watchful eye for because many of our businesses are small business. And so proposed changes to how pass-through entities are taxed would severely impact small businesses, many of which operate as pass-through entities. So your S Corps, your LLCs, and these changes would increase their tax burdens, forcing tough choices like cutting jobs or raising prices. I was down in Annapolis a couple of weeks ago, and it was talking about the statistic of about 90% of businesses that are registered in the state of Maryland are S Corps or LLCs. So this really is going to have a huge impact on the majority of small business in Maryland, if changes would be made to how that is looked at. We're very fortunate, like I said, to have partners with us. So that press conference on the 27th of February, we'll talk about some of these implications with legislation outlined in the governor's budget proposal. There are some other bills that have been introduced that will be discussed that morning at the Business Outlook, but I could tell you that really the focus of efforts from the combined associations and organizations are looking at what these tax implications are going to have on small business and getting into the granular levels of not just a title of a bill or a flashy headline, but what those impacts actually look like and what effects that's going to have from the day-to-day business operations. If you're increasing costs and administrative burdens or compliance reporting, someone's going to have to make changes there. And I'm sure, I'm preaching to the choir when we talk about the cost of goods today and just, living and the energy increases that we're seeing in our bills. The concerns are real from the business owners that I'm talking to that everyday operations are getting harder and harder and making a slim profit is getting more difficult, quite candidly. I'm going to stop there and ask if anybody has any questions or comments as to what I've said so far. Please feel free to add anything. I know we have a couple of financial people on the call, from bookkeepers to CPAs to financial planning. So if anybody has any other comments that you'd like to make or input from your perspective, please feel free to do so. Go for it, Ron.
Yeah, so we have, with these extra costs for compliance, administrative, things like that, like any other business owner, our intention is likely to pass some of those expenses over to our clients. So it's inflationary in that respect, that we're not going to take all of the cost to our bottom line. We're going to pass some of those costs on. So, and like you said, we're seeing the thing about energy. Our bills are, utility bills are going up. I understand that there's an issue in terms of that also. Maybe you'll talk to that, Angela, about
Mhm.
the utility and the Public Service Commission and what that's going to look like in terms of energy costs going up as well.
Yes. Thank you, Ron, for bringing that fact up, because that is, of course, what happens with businesses when you are trying to um, make a small profit and make your margins work, and you have budgets that you can't always absorb those costs as a business owner or as just a business operating. You do have to pass those on, and those are the conversations that we typically have in Annapolis, that we talk about those indirect costs of. Theory is good, the theology behind it makes sense, but when you get into how the nuts and bolts as to what this is going to look like, you're really hurting the people that you're trying to benefit. So thank you for making that point. Cheryl, did you want to add something?
I did, and I just lost my thought. Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh my gosh. Yeah,
No,
it
you're fine.
definitely will pass through to the customers because oh, I know what it was. We can't raise our rates because the state is going to artificially inflate our rates by 5%. So our customers are going to start getting invoices that are 5% higher, whether we do it or not. So I
Mhm.
feel like I can't raise my rates this year and maybe next year, who knows? So it's just such a bad idea. So there's so many things this year that are such bad ideas. Let your legislators and representatives know how you feel about these things because it's they do like to hear from everyday
Mhm.
people and like to hear what they think how this sort of thing will affect your business and whether your day-to-day operations will be affected. The sales tax is going to be so hard to follow. The combined reporting, the state is not ready for that yet in their systems. The comptroller's office is their systems are antiquated. One of
Mhm.
the things that the MACPA is working on with in Annapolis this year is to get the comptroller's systems up to par, and because they're just lacking. So look what happened with the 1099s that went to the wrong people. How
Yes.
awful is that? So the state's not ready for a lot of this stuff. They're just trying to push it through because they need the money. What they really need to do is cut their belts. So
Yes. And from the comptroller side, there is legislation that has been introduced, to your point, that can be supported. We have to celebrate the wins when we can support
yes,
legislation to modernize those systems in the comptroller's office that are just going to make life easier for everyone.
hopefully.
Um, so thank you for bringing that up. And to your point as well, you couldn't have, like, I wish I could write it on a billboard and, shout it from the rooftops. Legislators do want to hear from small business owners as to what these impacts look like. Sometimes we will hear, oh, you're the Chamber of Commerce, you're big business and those types of things. And at the end of the day, we're organizations that are rallying people together. But if they can hear specifics on what this looks like in your business, that carries a lot of weight, and it really does go further when they can say, oh, wow, that am not going to be able to increase my costs because of X, Y, and Z, or this is what's going to make it cumbersome for me to stay open, quite candidly. So thank you for bringing that up. A couple of good things that we have happening. There was legislation introduced to eliminate the cap for non-economic damages for liability suits. That does not seem to be going anywhere. I know that that has hit some roadblocks, and I had a senator tell me that that was not going to go far. Now I say that it's General Assembly, so anything can change, and you never know. But that is good. They're seeing where that could be burdensome for, again, businesses to get insurance and those types of things if that cap were eliminated. Beer and wine in grocery stores, they had this hearing the other day, and there was a lot of concern as to how this would impact businesses. And I've talked with a local grocer in Harford County, and she was saying that, one of the, again, on indirect impacts, that if you offer beer and wine in grocery stores, then you cannot have COD anymore. And that's really difficult for operations, that you have to be able to, produce payment upon delivery and those types of things. So there was a lot of pushback on that. I don't think that that is going to pass. The bill sponsor introduced some amendments, but there doesn't seem to be a temperature to move forward with that. Um, we're monitoring the admissions and amusement tax on food and beverage at the local level. This was a state bill introduced, but it would allow municipalities to charge an A&A tax on food and beverage at certain places. And the fiscal note on that talks about that, the small businesses, those impact would be meaningful. Again, it's you're creating a revenue stream with a tax, but the people who are purchasing those, you, me, everybody, are going to be the ones paying that. It's not, it's false revenue, in my opinion, that gets created. You're just kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul, as the old adage goes. Family leave. This has been one that we've been talking about for years, and Senator Hershey introduced a bill to delay the implementation of the family leave, and that is something that we support at the Harford County Chamber level. I know the Maryland Chamber is supportive of this, and it goes back to what Cheryl said earlier. The Department of Labor and other state agencies that would be involved in this do not have the bandwidth to absorb the operational impacts of this at this point. So we're hoping that that delay of the implementation will pass.
They did delay it, I think, the Department of
Did
Labor.
they? Perfect.
Let me look for it and I'll get back to you.
Yep, I know it was introduced, but I didn't know if they had passed it in both chambers yet. I didn't think it had been passed. But you might know more than I do, which I would
Well, I
appreciate,
think
because
I
I need all
got
the I
I
need
think
all the help I can get, Cheryl.
I think I got something that said that it was going to be delayed till 2027. I'll look for it and
Perfect.
I'll get back to you.
Yep. Um, Still going with the state. So March 3rd is the absolute dead date for bills to be introduced without any rules issues. March 17th is crossover day. So that's the day where bills that are go most likely to pass will be crossed over to the other chamber for a vote. So we need to be watching what is moving forward in committee, and we're doing that, but that's going to be kind of like that big day to say, okay, this is moving forward. We need to support this to make sure it gets across the finish line, or our voices need to be even louder in the opposite chamber to make sure they understand what the impacts of legislation will be. How it coincides with St. Patrick's Day, I'm not really sure. I don't know what that looks like. And then the 31st of March is when the budget needs to be voted upon and passed. So you will see in basically the next 30 days, a lot of the conversations are going to be focused around the budget and what this looks like and how they're going to make up the funds for the deficit, and um, really working through that in the budget reconciliation bill that has been introduced. Any questions or comments about state legislation? See, there was one in the chat, but I might not have cleared that from earlier, so I don't want to. Okay, perfect. Yeah, it looks like it's just proposed for now. We may go into special session with the budget. That's something else that we've heard about. That may happen because it is such a heavy lift at this point. So we will just keep our ears to the ground and stay tuned as much as we can and make sure that we're sharing that information with all of you. Jessica, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I'm not even sure if you can come off of mute if you're in the middle of something. But Jessica, or no, I think it's Heather. Representative, I think it's Heather, maybe Jessica. I apologize. Who's representing the Realtors Association?
That would be me.
Perfect. I'm sorry, Jessica. I thought that was you, and then I was like, did I get this wrong? Are there any huge bills that you're seeing at the state level that the chamber needs to be mindful of, or that you would like to bring awareness to on this call?
We're just watching, there's a lot of the squatter bills that are going on right now, so we've been watching those. There's a couple of housing bills that are going through where they want to do more affordable housing and
Mm-hmm.
use. So we're just kind of watching those and monitoring those.
Perfect. Thank you for that update. And if you need anything from us as the Chamber of Commerce, please reach out. You know, we're always here to have that conversation and hopefully work together if we can.
Thank you.
Moving on to the local level, so we're going to be getting into budget season very soon. The county executive hosted his town hall listening session a couple of weeks ago, and obviously most of the county's revenues go to the school system. You know, there's sheriff's department funding in there, EMS. So he spent a night listening to the concerns and the requests from residents as to where those funds need to go. And of course, the school system, there were many supporters for fully funding the school system, but we're going to see those meetings and the different entities going before county council to about their requests as we move forward in the spring. We have some comp zoning that will be coming up in the future and what that looks like for the county. So we'll be closely monitoring that. And at this point, that's all that I have. If anybody has any specific requests for updates on certain legislation, or you know, if you have a question on if we are supporting something or opposing a certain bill, please feel free to bring that up. I can absolutely review those with you.